Operation Tannenberg, 1944. The Warsaw Uprising. In the late summer of 1944, in the heart of occupied Europe, a city decided to fight. For 63 days, the Polish capital of Warsaw became the epicenter of a desperate, lonely struggle. This is the story of Operation Tannenberg, known to history as the Warsaw Uprising. The operation began on August 1, 1944, and lasted until October 2nd. It was not a battle between two regular armies on an open field. It was an urban insurrection fought street by street, house by house, in the shattered capital of Poland. The context is crucial. By July 1944, the tide of World War II had decisively turned. In the east, the Soviet Red Army was advancing relentlessly westward as part of its massive Operation Bagration, which shattered the German Army Group Center. Soviet units reached the eastern bank of the Vistula River, directly across from Warsaw's Praga district. To the west, the Allies had broken out of Normandy. For the Polish Home Army, the underground resistance force loyal to the Polish government in exile in London, the moment seemed to have arrived. Their long-held plan, codenamed Operation Tempest, called for a national uprising to liberate Polish cities just before the Soviets arrived. The goal was to seize control, to welcome the Soviets as hosts, not as liberators of a conquered territory, and to stake Poland's claim to post-war sovereignty. Warsaw was to be the crown jewel of this plan. But this operation, which the Germans codenamed Tannenberg after a historic battle, would become one of the most tragic and controversial episodes of the war. It was a clash not just of armies, but of starkly different strategies, political calculations, and human wills. To understand the uprising, we must understand the situation in Poland. For nearly 5 years, since 1939, Poland had endured a brutal dual occupation by Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The Polish state operated in secret, with a sprawling underground administration and a home army numbering hundreds of thousands of secret soldiers. The strategic picture in late July 1944 was dynamic and deceptive. The German military in the region appeared to be in full retreat, with reports of panicked columns fleeing west. The Home Army's leadership saw a window of opportunity. Strike the Germans while they were disorganized, secure the city in a matter of days, and present the arriving Soviets with a fait accompli. The political goal was paramount. The Polish government in exile in London and its underground representatives feared that Stalin intended to install a communist puppet government in Poland. By liberating their own capital, they hoped to compel Allied recognition and deter Soviet domination. The Germans, however, had a completely different goal. For them, Warsaw was a critical transportation hub on the east-west rail and road network. Its loss would cripple their ability to supply the crumbling Eastern Front. Furthermore, the city was a symbol of Polish nationhood, which Nazi ideology sought to utterly erase. Holding or brutally retaking Warsaw was a matter of military necessity and ideological principle. Both sides, therefore, saw the city as indispensable. For the Poles, it was the key to political survival. For the Germans, it was a key to military survival. The commander of the Polish Home Army was General Tadeusz Komorowski, codenamed Bohr. His chief of staff and the principal operational planner for the uprising was General Tadeusz Pilczynski. Their plan for Operation Tempest in Warsaw was ambitious yet born of necessity. The roughly 40,000 Home Army fighters in the city were lightly armed. They possessed perhaps enough weapons for 2,500 men to fight for 2 or 3 days. Their arsenal consisted of pistols, rifles, homemade grenades, and a few light machine guns smuggled in or captured over years of occupation. They had no heavy weapons, no tanks, no artillery, no anti-aircraft guns, and no means to attack fortified buildings. Their strategy relied on 3 critical assumptions. First, that the initial surprise attack would allow them to seize key strategic buildings, police stations, and German strongpoints within the first 72 hours. Second, that the German forces in the city would be weak and demoralized, capable of being overwhelmed. And third, and most crucially, that the Soviet Red Army, stationed just miles away across the Vistula River, would continue its offensive, cross the river, and link up with them within a week. The Home Army's great strength was its intimate knowledge of the city, its sewers, its back alleys, its cellars. They were also fueled by an immense patriotic fervor and a 5-year pent-up desire for action. Their communication network was sophisticated, but their challenges were immense. Beyond the lack of heavy weaponry, they were not a uniformed army but civilians who would reveal themselves only on WWII. The moment the uprising began, coordination of such a vast, clandestine force was extraordinarily difficult. Finally, their entire plan hinged on an external force, the Soviet Union, over whose actions they had no control. It was a gamble of the highest order. The commander of the Polish Home Army was General Tadeusz Komorowski, codenamed Bohr. His chief of staff and the principal operational planner for the uprising was General Tadeusz Pilchinski. Their plan for Operation Tempest in Warsaw was ambitious yet born of necessity. The roughly 40,000 Home Army fighters in the city were lightly armed. They possessed perhaps enough weapons for 2,500 men to fight for 2 or 3 days. Their arsenal consisted of pistols, rifles, homemade grenades, and a few light machine guns smuggled in or captured over years of occupation. They had no heavy weapons, no tanks, no artillery, no anti-aircraft guns, and no means to attack fortified buildings. Their strategy relied on 3 critical assumptions. First, that the initial surprise attack would allow them to seize key strategic buildings, police stations, and German strongpoints within the first 72 hours. Second, that the German forces in the city would be weak and demoralized, capable of being overwhelmed. And third, and most crucially, that the Soviet Red Army, stationed just miles away across the Vistula River, would continue its offensive, cross the river, and link up with them within a week. The Home Army's great strength was its intimate knowledge of the city, its sewers, its back alleys, its cellars. They were also fueled by an immense patriotic fervor and a 5-year pent-up desire for action. Their communication network was sophisticated, but their challenges were immense. Beyond the lack of heavy weaponry, they were not a uniformed army but civilians who would reveal themselves only on WWII. The moment the uprising began, coordination of such a vast, clandestine force was extraordinarily difficult. Finally, their entire plan hinged on an external force, the Soviet Union, over whose actions they had no control. It was a gamble of the highest order. The German reaction was swift and brutal. Initially caught off guard, the local garrison under General Rainer Stahel was quickly reinforced. Overall command for the suppression of the uprising was given to SS-Obergruppenführer Erich von dem Bach-Zalewski, a man experienced in anti-partisan warfare on the Eastern Front, a euphemism often meaning atrocities against civilians. Von dem Bach commanded a horrifying amalgamation of forces. Alongside regular Wehrmacht army units and elite SS panzer divisions like the Viking and Hermann Göring, he was given control of so-called anti-partisan formations. Most notorious were the SS Sturmbrigade Dirlewanger, a penal battalion of convicted criminals led by the psychopathic Oskar Dirlewanger, and the Rona Brigade, made up of Soviet collaborators known for their savagery. The Luftwaffe provided constant air support, including Stuka dive bombers and heavy bombers. The German plan, Operation Tannenberg, was simple in concept: crush the uprising with overwhelming, indiscriminate force. Their strength was absolute superiority in firepower, mobility, and air power. They deployed heavy artillery, tanks, flamethrowers, and giant railway guns that could level entire city blocks with a single shell. However, the Germans also faced challenges. Their forces were a mix of disparate, often poorly coordinated units. The street-by-street fighting negated some advantages of their heavy equipment. The insurgents' use of the sewer system for movement and resupply was a constant tactical problem. And, initially at least, they underestimated the scale and determination of the Polish resistance. The German command's intent, however, went beyond mere military suppression. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, stated that Warsaw was to be razed to the ground, providing a terrifying example to the rest of Europe. This ideological directive would shape the coming battle. The initial strike, August 1st to 4th at 5 p.m. on August 1st, WWII, the uprising began. The Poles achieved significant surprise, seizing large sections of the city center, Old Town, and Zalaborz district. However, they failed to capture the key bridges over the Vistula or the airports. Most critically, the German strongpoints in police headquarters and army barracks held out. The fighting immediately settled into a bloody stalemate. The Poles controlled isolated districts, but not the main arteries or the riverfront. The German counteroffensive, August 5th onward, von dem Bach abandoned costly infantry assaults. His new tactic was methodical and ruthless. German forces, spearheaded by Dirlewanger's and Rona's brigades, would isolate a Polish district, then systematically destroy it using artillery, airstrikes, and flamethrowers. They would then advance over the rubble. The Old Town, the historic heart of Warsaw, was pounded into dust and captured by early September. The Soviet halt. The Polish assumption of Soviet aid proved catastrophically wrong. On August 3rd, the Soviet advance on the Warsaw Front abruptly stopped. Soviet forces made only one major and unsuccessful attempt to cross the Vistula south of the city in mid-September. Western Allied airdrops from bases in Italy provided some supplies, but they were woefully inadequate, and many drops fell into German-controlled areas. The insurgents and the city's civilian population were left isolated. The agony of the city. The battle descended into a nightmare of attrition. The Poles fought with incredible tenacity, using the sewer network to move between districts. Civilians suffered horribly, with mass executions becoming commonplace, most infamously in the Walla district, where up to 50,000 were murdered in the first week. By September, the Poles held only a few shrinking islands of ruins. The final act, with no hope of relief, supplies exhausted, and civilians starving, General Bor Komorowski entered into surrender negotiations with von dem Bach. On October 2nd, after 63 days, the Warsaw Uprising officially ended. The terms of the capitulation were surprisingly formal. The Home Army fighters were to be treated as prisoners of war under the Geneva Convention, a condition largely, though not universally, honored. The civilian population, nearly 550,000 people, was expelled from the city and sent to transit camps or for forced labor in the Reich. Then, on Hitler's explicit orders, German demolition squads began the systematic, street-by-street destruction of what remained of Warsaw. Using flamethrowers and explosives, they labored for 3 months to ensure the Polish capital was erased from the map. When the Soviet Red Army finally liberated the empty, silent ruins in January 1945, over 85% of the city was gone. The human cost was staggering. Approximately 16,000 Polish insurgents were killed and 6,000 badly wounded. But the greatest toll was on the civilians. An estimated 150,000 to 200,000 were killed during the fighting, most in mass executions. German losses were around 16,000 killed and missing. The political consequences were profound and bitter. The uprising destroyed the Home Army, the armed wing of the London-based government. The Soviets stood by as their rival for post-war power was annihilated. Just months later, they installed a communist government in Poland, which would dominate the country for the next 45 years. Operation Tannenberg, the Warsaw Uprising, stands as a monument to desperate courage and catastrophic miscalculation. It was a battle where military strategy was fatally intertwined with cold political calculation. It demonstrated the horrific cost of urban warfare on a civilian population and remains a defining and deeply painful chapter in the history of Poland and of World War II. The uprising ended, but its story never could. In the post-war decades, Poland's communist authorities attempted to erase the Warsaw Uprising from national memory, either silencing it or distorting its narrative. Official history celebrated a different past: the 1943 Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and the 1945 arrival of the Red Army. Yet the truth was preserved. It lived on in underground publications, in hidden home archives, and in the stories of veterans who often called themselves the Cursed Soldiers. The uprising remained an open wound and a powerful symbol of the quest for sovereignty. It was only after the fall of communism in 1989 that the uprising received full, official recognition. In 2004, on its 60th anniversary, the modern, interactive Warsaw Uprising Museum opened, becoming one of Poland's most important sites of memory. And every year, on August 1st at 5 p.m., the WWII, all of Warsaw comes to a standstill for 1 minute. Sirens sound, traffic stops, and citizens honor with silence those who rose to fight. This is not a celebration of victory, but a homage to sacrifice and an unbroken spirit. Today, the Warsaw Uprising stands as a complex historical lesson. It is a case study in the tragic intersection of military strategy and grand politics, where local courage became a pawn in a global struggle. It demonstrated, with horrifying clarity, the catastrophic human cost of urban warfare on a civilian population. Its symbol, the kotwica or anchor, the Polish fighting solidarity emblem, remains one of the country's most powerful signs of resistance. The debate continues. Was it a necessary act of defiance or a catastrophic miscalculation? Historians still grapple with the decisions made in those fateful summer days. But beyond the strategy and the politics, the uprising endures as a testament to the human will for freedom. It is a story of a city that chose to fight against impossible odds, was erased from the map, and then, brick by brick, was rebuilt from the ashes by its people. The legacy of Warsaw in 1944 is not just one of destruction, but ultimately of resilience. If you want more deep dives into pivotal moments of history, told with clarity and depth, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications.